Chapter 37. The Club. Under the scorching afternoon sun, Klein left his house. Since he had to walk all the way from Iron Cross Street to Welch's place, he wore a linen shirt instead of his formal attire of top hat and leather boots. He wore a matching brown coat, a round felt hat, and a pair of old leather shoes. That way, he did not need to worry that the stench of his sweat would contaminate the rather expensive suit. As he went down Daffodil Street, he strolled toward Iron Cross Street. When he passed by the square around the corner, he subconsciously took a glance. The tents had already vanished. The circus troupe from before had left after finishing their performance. Klein originally imagined the animal trainer who had helped him tell his fortune to be a hidden expert. He believed she had purposely appeared to guide him after discovering something unique about him, and that she would meet him and provide hints for the future. However, none of that happened. She left for the next stop in the tour with the circus troupe. How can there be so many cliched tropes? Klein shook his head while grimacing a smile. He turned toward Iron Cross Street. Iron Cross Street was not characterized by just a single street. Like its name suggested, it was formed by two roads that crossed each other. With the intersection at its core, it was split into Left Street, Right Street, Upper Street, and Lower Street. Klein, Benson, and Melissa previously lived on Lower Street. However, the residents living at his former apartment and the surrounding area did not think of the area as Lower Street. Instead, they created the term Middle Street. By doing so, they made a clear difference between those staying there and the poor who lived 200 meters down the road. There, a bedroom was occupied by 5 or 6 people, and sometimes even up to 10. Klein walked along the periphery of Left Street as he let his mind wander. He recalled the Antigonus family's notebook and how it was missing. He thought of its importance to the Nighthawks and thought of the deaths that resulted from it. His heart slowly turned heavy as his face turned ashen. At that moment, a familiar voice sounded. "Lad." "Oh." Klein turned his head curiously and found himself by Smyron Bakery's entrance. Mrs. Wendy with a head of gray hair was greeting him with a wave and a warm smile. "You don't look very happy?" Wendy asked genially. Klein rubbed his face and said, "A little. Regardless of your worries, tomorrow will always come," said Mrs. Wendy with a smile. "Here, try out my newly created sweet iced tea. I'm not sure if it suits the palate of the locals." "Locals? Aren't you one, Mrs. Smyron?" Klein shook his head in amusement. "Trying out something means it's free, right?" Wendy Smyron raised her chin a little and said, "You guessed right. I'm actually a Southerner. I came to Tianjin with my husband, but that was more than 40 years ago. Haha. Back then, Benson was not born yet. Even your parents did not know each other. I have always been a little unaccustomed to the dietary preferences of Northerners, and I'm always missing my hometown's food. I miss pork sausages, potato bread, roasted pancakes, vegetables fried in lard, and roasted meat with specialty sauces. Oh, and I also miss sweet iced tea." Klein suffused a smile when he heard that. "Mrs. Smyron, this sure is a topic that makes me hungry, but I feel a lot better. Thank you very much. Delicacies can always cure sorrow." Wendy handed him a cup of brownish-red liquid. "This is sweet iced tea I made according to my memories. Try it and tell me if it's nice." After thanking her, Klein took a sip and found it resembling iced black tea from Earth. However, it was not as stimulating. The taste of tea was stronger and felt more refreshing. It instantly expelled the heat brought by the burning sun. "It's excellent," he marveled. "That puts me at ease." Wendy smiled with squinted eyes as she watched him finish the cup of tea in a genial manner. After chatting with Mrs. Smyron about his moving, Klein returned to the street he was most familiar with. There were far fewer street-side hawkers in the afternoon. They gathered again after 5:30. The ones that stayed behind looked drowsy and listless. The moment he entered the area, Klein's heart suddenly felt overwhelmed by darkness. His heart felt heavy, down, and gloomy for an inexplicable reason. What's happening? He sharply sensed something wrong about himself. He immediately stopped and observed his surroundings, but did not see anything strange. After some thought, Klein raised his hand and tapped his glabella like he was thinking. The extent of his vision immediately transformed. The auras of the hawkers and pedestrians all appeared. Before Klein could observe the colors of their health, his attention was pulled away by the colors that represented gloominess. He was unable to determine the exact thoughts of the observed, but the despondent, apathetic, and gloomy impression was deeply carved into his heart. As he surveyed the area, he realized that even the sun could not disperse those dark colors. It was a sense of gloom that tainted them from years of repression. Upon seeing this, Klein instantly understood the reason. Just as old Neil said, activating his spirit vision easily pulled him into unfamiliar environments and made him feel discomfort. It was also easy for himself to be affected by the emotions of others. A similar principle could be used on an ability like perception. This was an ability he obtained without additional practice after becoming a seer. It was a passive sense that could not be declined. It allowed him to directly sense the existence of anything abnormal. There was bound to be a level of interaction when perceiving things. Therefore, in the beyonder eyes of someone like a spirit medium, the intensity of everyone's perception is clear. It is like a fire in the night. Therefore, people with high perceptivity were naturally affected by the intense atmosphere of anything abnormal. It could only be repeatedly practiced to grasp, control, and adapt to such outcomes. Such a repressed color is probably formed over extended periods of time, right? Klein sighed as he shook his head, feeling somewhat affected. He tapped his glabella twice again and tried hard to converge his spirituality. Tap, tap, tap. Klein walked toward the apartment and sensed for any abnormal existences or tiny connections while also searching for the Antigonus family's notebook, which he had hidden. The streets were the same as usual. There was filthy water and trash on the streets. It only cleared up when he reached the apartment's entrance. Klein pushed open the half-closed door and circled the first floor in the darkness that the sunlight could not reach. The wooden stairs creaked constantly as he went up them. The second floor was as dim as always. Klein released his perception and looked into the darkness. However, not only did he fail to discover any clues regarding his notebook, he even failed to see any invisible spiritual bodies. If it's so easy to encounter them, most ordinary people would not have already sensed the existence of extraordinary matters. Klein sighed in reflection. He had already understood that most spirits did not exist in the form of spiritual bodies, but in the form of spirituality. Only a spirit medium could effectively communicate with them. After circling the third floor once, Klein left the apartment and retraced his memory's footsteps towards Welch's place. He walked for a full hour, but did not discover anything along the way. Standing outside the garden bungalow, Klein looked at the building through the locked iron gates and mumbled to himself. There's no need for me to search Welch's place, right? Captain and Madame Daly must have done a carpet search of the place. Besides, I don't have the key. They can't expect me to climb the walls, right? I'll try another path tomorrow. I've walked so much today, but there are no step counter rankings. While lampooning, Klein returned to the nearby district. He planned on taking a public carriage to Blackthorn Security Company to retrieve his daily allocation of 30 bullets. He needed to make use of his time and practice. A seer's lack of quick and effective offensive means could only be made up with his revolver and cane. The district around Welch's place was relatively clean. Shops with clean and bright windows lined the two sides of the street. At the turn of the street, Klein was just about to seek out the carriage stop when his gaze swept past a few signboards on the second floor. Harrod's Department Store, Military Veterans Mess, Divination Club. Divination Club. Klein silently repeated the name and recalled that he had to act as a seer. Yes, I should take a look and seek out new ideas. Amid his mixed thoughts, Klein went across the street and went to the second floor. He entered the main foyer to see a beautiful female attendant. The woman with coiled brownish-yellow hair sized up Klein before saying with a smile, "Sir, do you wish to have your fortune told, or do you wish to join our club?" "What are the conditions for entry?" asked Klein casually. The woman explained with great familiarity. "Fill in your particulars and pay an annual membership fee. The first year is £5 and subsequent years will be £1 a year. Don't worry, we are not like political or business clubs which allow entry through recommendations from formal members. Members can freely use the club's meeting room and various divination rooms and tools. They can enjoy the coffee and tea we provide and read the newspapers and magazines we subscribe for free. They can buy lunch, dinner, and alcoholic beverages at cost price, as well as education materials and materials needed for divination. In addition, we invite at least one famous fortune teller to lecture every month to answer any questions. Most importantly, you can find a bunch of friends with the same hobbies and have an exchange with them. It sounds pretty good, but I do not have the money. Klein gave a self-deprecating smile before asking, "Then what if I want my fortune told?" Chapter 38. Novice Hobbyist. Upon hearing Klein's question, the beautiful lady with elegantly tied-up brownish-yellow hair appeared to lose her patience. However, she maintained her smile and said, "Our members are free to do divination for others in the club. They also have their prices, and we take a very tiny cut as a fee. If you wish to have your fortune told, you can take a look at this album. It has introductions and rates of the members who are willing to do divination for others. However, it's Monday afternoon, so most of our members are busy at work. We only have 5 here today." As she introduced the club, she invited Klein to have a seat on the sofa beside a window in the reception hall. Then, she flipped through the album and pointed out the present club members. Hannes Vincent, famous Tianjin fortune teller, the club's resident mentor, good at various forms of divination. He charges for solely each time. It's really expensive. That's enough to feed Benson, Melissa, and me to 2 sumptuous dinners. Klein clicked his tongue silently and did not reply. When the woman saw this, she continued flipping the page and introducing one member after another. And the final one, Glassy, a member who joined the club this year. He is skilled in tarot divination. He charges 2 pence each time. "Sir, who do you plan on choosing?" Klein did not stand on ceremony and answered, "Mr. Glassy." The female attendant fell silent for 2 seconds before saying, "Sir, I have to remind you that Mr. Glassy is only considered a novice." "I understand. I will be responsible for my own decision." Klein nodded with a smile. "Then please follow me." The woman stood up and led Klein through a door beside the reception hall. It was not a very long corridor, and an open meeting room was situated at its end. There was enough sunlight, and it was equipped with tables and chairs. There were newspapers, magazines, and paper cards. A faint coffee aroma drifted out. About 2 rooms from the meeting room, the attendant gestured for Klein to stop. She sped up her pace and entered the room. Schiffer shouted gently, "Divination." "Mr. Glassy, someone wishes." "Me?" A voice filled with surprise and doubt immediately sounded. Following that, there was the sound of a chair moving. "Yes. Which divination room would you like to use?" replied the lady without any emotion. "Topaz room." "I like Topaz." Glassy appeared by the meeting room's door and looked curiously at Klein, who was waiting not far away. He was a man in his 30s. His skin was slightly dark and his pupils were a dark green shade. Under his light, yellow and soft hair, he was dressed in a white shirt and black vest. A monocle hung from his chest, and he seemed to have a good disposition. The attendant did not say anything further as she opened the door to the Topaz room, which was next to the meeting room. The curtains inside were tightly shut, making it dim. It appeared that only by doing so would one gain revelations from the gods and spirits to obtain an accurate divination outcome. "Hello there. I'm Glassy. I never expected you to choose me for your divination." Glassy gave a gentleman's bow, briskly stepped into the room, and sat behind a long table. "Frankly, I'm only attempting divination for others. I do not have much experience. For now, I'm not a good fortune teller. You still have a chance for regret." After Klein returned the bow, he entered and closed the door behind him. By the light seeping through the curtains, he said with a smile, "You are a really honest man, but I'm someone who is very firm on his choices. Please have a seat." Glassy pointed at the seat in front of him and thought for a few seconds. "Divination is my hobby. Heh. In life, one often receives guidance from the divine, but he is unable to accurately understand the ordinary person meaning. This is the reason why divination exists and also why I joined this club. In this aspect, I still lack confidence. Let's make the divination that follows an exchange a free exchange. How do you like my suggestion? I'll cover the fees the club requires. It's just a quarter pence." Klein did not agree or shake his head. Instead, he smiled. "From the looks of it, you have a pretty well-paying and decent job." While he said so, he leaned his body forward slightly. He held his forehead with his right fist and tapped at it twice. "But that does not enhance the accuracy of my divination," answered Glassy humorously. "Does your head hurt? Do you want to divine problems regarding health?" "A little. I wish to divine where an item is." Klein had already thought of an excuse as he slowly leaned back. In his eyes, Glassy's aura clearly presented itself. The orange colors by his lungs were dark and sparse. They even influenced the brightness in other areas. "This is not a symptom of exhaustion. Klein nodded in an indiscernible manner. Are you searching for a lost item? Glassy thought for a few seconds before saying, then let's do a simple determination. He pushed the neatly stacked tarot cards on the black table toward Klein. Calm down. Think of that item and ask yourself, can it still be found? While doing so, shuffle and cut the deck. All right. Klein actually did not remember what the ancient notebook looked like. All he could do was repeat the question to himself. Can the Antigonus family's notebook still be found? While he repeated the thought, he skillfully shuffled and cut the deck. Glassy picked the topmost card and pushed it in front of Klein. The card was facing down horizontally. Turn it clockwise until it sits vertical. Then flip it open. If the card is inverted, which means the picture on the card is facing away from you, it indicates that the item cannot be found. If the card is upright, then we can continue the divination and seek its actual location. Klein followed his instructions and turned the horizontal card vertical. He clasped the end of the tarot card and flipped it over. It was an inverted card. What a pity. Glassy sighed. Klein did not respond because his attention was focused on the tarot card in front of him. The inverted card's picture was dressed in gorgeous clothes and splendid headdress. The Fool. It's the Fool again? It can't be so coincidental, right? According to the Hanged Man and Old Neil, divination is the outcome of the communication of spirituality and the spirit world with a higher dimensional me. Tarot cards are only a convenient tool to read what the truth symbolizes. In theory, using any divination item doesn't matter as it doesn't affect the outcome. Klein frowned as he thought for a moment. Can it be divined whether the item is already in the hands of others? Of course. Follow the same procedure and do it again. Glassy nodded with rich interest. Klein shuffled and cut the deck while thinking of his question. He drew a card and placed it horizontally before turning it vertical clockwise. He finished all the preparations with a serious expression. Taking a deep breath, Klein reached out his hand and flipped over the tarot card. Please do not be the Fool again. While praying, he suddenly relaxed because the card was that of the Star and it was inverted. From the looks of it, the item has not been taken by others yet, interpreted Glassy with a smile. Klein nodded and raised his right hand. He tapped his glabella, looking as though he was deep in thought. Then, he took out 2 pennies with a dark copper luster from his pocket and pushed it towards Glassy. Didn't I say it was free? Glassy said with a frown. Klein laughed as he got up. This is the respect divination deserves. All right, thank you for your generosity. Glassy stood up and reached out his hand. After shaking his hand, Klein took 2 steps back and turned around. He walked to the door and twisted the doorknob. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly turned his head and made a terse sound. Mr. Glassy, I suggest that you see a doctor as soon as possible. Focus on your lungs. Why? Asked Glassy in surprise. Are you cursing me because you aren't pleased with the divination results? Klein thought for a moment before saying, it's a symptom based on the color of your face. Well, your glabella seems dark. Glabella seems dark. It was the first time Glassy was hearing such a description. Klein did not explain further as he walked out the room with a smile. He closed the wooden door behind him. Is he an unlicensed doctor or a herbalist? Glassy shook his head, amused. He then picked up his monocle for divination. On careful look, he realized his glabella was indeed dark. But this was a problem of the environment. In the darkness, due to the closed curtains, not only was his glabella dark, his entire face was shrouded in darkness. It's not a very likable joke. Glassy muttered. He worriedly divined his own health to make sure that everything was all right. After leaving the divination club, Klein had an additional plan for the future. It was to save as much money as possible to pay the annual fee to become a member of the club, after which he could begin acting as a seer. As for why he did not choose to do it independently, it was because he temporarily lacked the resources and channels. He could not bring himself to stand on the streets as a hawker since he cared for his reputation. A few minutes later, the public carriage arrived. He spent 2 pence and reached Zutland Street, which was not very far off. He pushed open the door to Blackthorn Security Company, but did not see the familiar brown-haired girl. He only saw the black-haired, green-eyed Leonard Mitchell with his poetic bearing behind the reception counter. Good afternoon. Where's Roseanne? Klein asked after taking off his hat and bowing. Leonard smiled and pointed at the partition. It's her shift tonight at the armory. Without waiting for Klein to ask another question, Leonard said as though he was pondering over a matter. Klein, I have a question that has always puzzled me. What is it? Klein wore a blank look. Leonard stood up and smilingly said with a relaxed tone, "Why did Welch and Naya commit suicide on the spot while you returned home?" "It likely has to do with how the unknown existence made me take the Antigonus family's notebook away to hide it," answered Klein with the official surmise. Leonard paced around before turning to look straight into Klein's eyes. "If your suicide was meant to silence you and wipe out any clues, why weren't you made to destroy the notebook there and then?" Chapter 39. Interesting trick. In fact, I do not know if the notebook is destroyed or hidden, but by using backward reasoning, if it is to be destroyed, it could have been done on the spot. There was no need for me to take it away to carry out the destruction. Upon hearing Leonard's question, Klein instantly went into keyboard detective mode and said with a sigh, "Perhaps when Welch, Naya, and I made contact with the unknown existence, it enjoyed the sacrifice of life or wished for similar situations to continue. With the suicide definitely easily discoverable, I was made to take away the notebook to hide it so as to prepare for the existence's second round of entertainment. However, some mishap happened during the process and I failed to succeed in my suicide." This was a reasoned guess Klein made from his consumption of novels, movies, and TV dramas which involved cult sacrifices. As for the mishap that happened midway, he knew very well that it was due to the unexpected variable of him being a transmigrator. Quite a good explanation, but I believe there might be other possibilities. Welch's and Naya's suicide sacrifice might have made it possible for the unknown existence to descend on this world. Then, that notebook is a vessel or a breeding ground for evil. It made you take it away to hide it, worried that we would destroy it if we discovered its birth before it became strong. Leonard Mitchell suggested another possibility. Having said that, he stared into Klein's eyes and smiled slightly. "Of course, perhaps the notebook has been destroyed. The goal is to hide its content, to conceal the vessel or the brooding of evil. That way, there is a sufficient reason for your failed suicide." What does he mean? Is he suspecting me? Is he suspecting that the original Klein's body is a vessel or used for the brooding of evil? No, what he's being a vessel for is a transmigrator. Actually, brooding isn't a correct term. Klein was taken aback. While he secretly criticized the idea, he weighed his words. "I will not try to defend myself since I've lost memories from that period. Be it Captain or Madame Daly, they have already confirmed that I'm fine. Your joke isn't funny. I'm only considering a possibility. It does not eliminate the blow the unknown existence encountered when it descended which caused your suicide to fail. We believe that the goddess will ultimately bless us." Leonard laughed as he changed the subject. "Did you discover anything in the afternoon?" After the conversation and the previous encounters, Klein was very wary of Leonard. He answered in a composed manner, "No, I plan on trying a different route tomorrow afternoon." He pointed to the partition and said, "I'll need to head to the armory to draw the bullets." The shooting club opened to 9 at night. After all, its availability increased only after many of its members got off work. "May Goddess bless you." Leonard smiled as he gestured the sign of the crimson moon on his chest. He watched Klein pass through the partition and listened to his footsteps down the stairs. Leonard's smile gradually vanished as a look of doubt appeared in his green eyes. He whispered something with a displeased tone. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Down the stairs, Klein followed the gas lamp-illuminated corridor to the armory and archives. The iron door was open and the brown-haired Roseanne was standing in front of the table. She was chatting with a top hat-wearing middle-aged man with a thick black beard. "Good afternoon, no? Good evening. It's always night here. Klein, I heard from old Neil that you have become a Beyonder? It's called Seer?" Roseanne turned her head and deluged him with her questions. She did not hide her curiosity and concern. Klein nodded with a smile. "Good afternoon, Miss Roseanne. It's indeed always night here, but it makes one feel a sense of serenity. The description you gave wasn't accurate enough. It should be said that the sequence potion I consumed has the name Seer. You still chose to become a Beyonder after all," Roseanne said with a sigh as she fell into a deep thought. Klein looked at the middle-aged man beside her and asked politely, "You are another Nighthawk member or one of the other 2 civilian staff I have not met?" Roseanne puckered her lips and said, "Brett, our colleague. He wishes to change slots with me to free up the night after tomorrow. He plans on going to the theater in the North Borough with his wife to watch The Prideful One." It's to celebrate their 15th-year wedding anniversary. He's truly a romantic gentleman. Brett smiled as he extended his hand and said, with Miss Roseanne around, there's nothing that requires repeating. Hello, Klein. I never expected you to become a Beyonder so quickly. As for me, I might never have the courage. Perhaps it's as the saying goes, the ignorant knows no fear. Klein said in a self-deprecating manner as he extended his hand to shake Brett's. Me not having courage is not something bad, said Brett with a shake of his head. A Beyonder once told me before his death to never probe strange and dangerous matters. The less you know, the longer you live. At that moment, Roseanne interjected. Klein, there's no need to mind it. I heard from old Neil that as a seer, you are used as support. It's relatively safe as long as you do not attempt to communicate with unknown existences. Why are you dressed in such clothes? It's so unbecoming of a gentleman. What are you here for? I'm here to draw my 30 bullets. Klein did not reply to Roseanne's first question. He believed that the lady would quickly forget the matter. All right. Roseanne pointed at the table and said, Brett, it's all yours. You should know where the keys and bullets are. Oh, old Neil really is petty. He did not even leave his hand-ground coffee behind. He promised me that I could drink my fill today. She prattled on as Klein received the bullets. The duo left together and went their separate ways at Zutland Street. One took a public carriage home while the other walked into the shooting club. Bang, bang, bang. Klein repeated the process, gripping the gun, raising his arms, shooting, releasing the cylinder, ejecting the empty shells, and stuffing in rounds, again and again. He became familiar with the process and built it into his muscle memory. Of course, he had a few breaks in between to review and correct the process. After finishing his practice, Klein used the grounds to do various exercises like push-ups. He worked hard to train his body to improve his physique. Once everything was over, he sat in an untracked carriage home. Only then he realized it was nearing 7 and the sky was already dark. Just as Klein was planning to head to the market or streets to buy the ingredients for dinner, the door opened. Melissa had returned with her stationery-filled bag. Apart from that, she carried quite a lot of groceries. I thought you and Benson would be home rather late. This morning, I took out one solely from the place where you stash your money. Upon seeing her brother's questioning look, Melissa explained in her usual serious manner. Since you took the money, why didn't you take the public carriage to school? Klein had been reminded of the matter from the morning. Melissa said with a frown, why should I take a public carriage? It costs 4 pence to get to school. A return trip means 8 pence. Counting Benson and you, we will be spending 24 pence on transportation daily. That's a whole 2 solely. In a week, yes, without counting Sunday, that's still 12 solely. It's almost equal to our rent. Stop, stop, stop. Don't flaunt your mathematical prowess. Klein lowered his palm in an amused manner. Melissa first stopped before adding, it's pretty good walking to school. Or that everyone should exercise frequently. Besides, I can pick some damaged components on the way. Teacher said. Klein chuckled and said, then let's do the math again. The public carriage costs 12 solely. The rent is 12 solely and 3 pence. It's a total of £1 for solely and 3 pence. Using Benson's salary is enough to pay for it, and there will be quite a bit of change left. Yes, he received last week's salary. As for me, I can still earn £1.10 solely every week. Even if we eat meat every day while counting expenses like gas, charcoal, wood, and condiments, we would still have some left if we are frugal with lunch. We can even subscribe to the morning papers for just 1 penny. In 2 months, when I make up for the advance payment, I can save money for both you and Benson. We can have new clothes. But we have to think of the possible accidents. Melissa stayed firm on her point. Klein smiled at her and said, then, we can eat less meat. Don't you find spending 50, no, 100 minutes on the road a waste of time? You could use that time to read more and think over problems and improve your results. That way, Melissa, you will graduate with excellent grades. You will be able to find a job with a pretty good salary. When that happens, what is there to worry about? He fully displayed his experience gained from debating with people on message boards and finally convinced Melissa. She agreed to take the public carriage to school. Phew, I've finally suckered her into doing it. No, how can I call it suckering? This is called convincing. Klein lampooned before taking over the groceries that Melissa had bought. He said with a sigh, remember to buy beef or meat like mutton and chicken. Eat until you're full and enjoy yourself. Only then will you be equipped with a healthy body and a clever brain to match the demanding requirements needed for your studies. Just mentioning it makes me salivate. Melissa puckered her lips and after a few seconds of silence, said, "All right." The next morning, after ensuring that Melissa took a public carriage, Klein and Benson separated and went to their respective companies. The moment Klein stepped into the door, he saw old Neil and Roseanne chatting by the reception desk. The former was still in his classic black robe, without any concern for the gazes of others. The latter had changed into a casual cream-colored dress. "Good morning, Mr. Neil," Miss Roseanne greeted Klein as he took off his hat. Old Neil gave him a mischievous look. "Good morning. You did not hear anything you shouldn't have heard last night, right?" "No, I slept very well." Klein was also quite puzzled over that. He could only put it down to his inadequate perception. "Haha, don't mind that. Actually, it's not that easily heard." Old Neil pointed to the partition and said, "Go to the armory. We will continue our mysticism lessons this morning." Klein nodded and followed old Neil down the stairs and arrived at the armory to replace Brett, who had been on duty the entire night. "What will we be learning today?" asked Klein curiously. Old Neil dragged out his response and said, "The complicated and basic knowledge. But before that, let me teach you an interesting trick." He pointed at the silver chain on his wrist. There was a pure moonstone hanging from the chain.